Thank you very much, Nick, and welcome everybody. Hope you've enjoyed the athletics tonight if you was watching it. Some great competition again, and it's great to see athletics being taken part in after this long and difficult summer with all that. So my name's Trevor Painter. I'm the junior team leader for Great Britain, and we're going to take you through some selection insights tonight. It's particularly the junior selection process, so we're not going to look at appeals processes because unfortunately we don't kind of have that with the junior selection because of the timescales. We literally pick the team on the Monday, inform everybody on Tuesday or latest on Tuesday, and then they're flying off the following week, so there's no real time to fit appeals in. But if anyone wants to talk about appeals later, we can do in the Q&A later on. It's a great opportunity this for me because we do have a lot of people, questioning why such a body been picked and complaining about this and that, and it is mainly down to not understanding the full process that's involved. So this is great for us to be able to circulate this information and create a better understanding amongst our community. First up, so where do we actually find the selection policy? So it's nice and easy. You go to uk.org.uk, you click on performance, and then the current one says 2020 selection policies. Now, thanks to our good friend COVID-19, there's actually nothing there at the moment. It's all been taken down because everything was cancelled. But normally you would see the selection policies for every single event that year. So that would be cross-country events, it would be indoors, and it would be outdoors, both senior and age group championships. So all the information's there. Now what we're going to do today, because obviously there's nothing in there at the moment, we're going to take you through what happened in 2019, which was the European Under-20 Championships in Borås, Sweden. So we'll take you through the process we had there because it's a better way of showing you how it's done. So first up, the selection is done in two waves. So the first actual meeting is the day after the national championships, or the national junior championships. And here we select people from round one, which we'll come to shortly, as well as athletes who we take from round two that we believe as a panel, they're clear medal contenders for Borås. The rest of the team is selected 2 weeks later. As I mentioned earlier, it's pretty close to when we actually jet off to the championship. So athletes get another 2 weeks to get the times, get the distances, get the heights that they require to achieve selection. And that's where we complete the team. Now, at the European Championship year, we're allowed 3 people per event. So if you think of that, that could be 120 individuals if we had an unlimited budget. But sadly, UKA is a business and not a charity, and we have to restrict it. We have to have budget constraints. So for European Championships, we usually have around 50 to 55 athletes that we can take. Now, this particular year, 2019, was unprecedented, the number of people that were achieving the selection process. So I was on the phone to Lorna Dwyer twice a week, every week, pestering and mithering and asking, can we have more, can we have more? And begging and stealing and borrowing to try and get more people on that plane because I could see quite from an early date, we had already 45 and then 50 and then 60 people that had the qualifying standard. And so it was important for me to make sure we could take as many of those people as possible. Unfortunately, in a World Championship year, so every second year, we're only allowed to take 2 per event. So that tends to be a smaller team, and the selection standards tend to be a little higher as well. Moving on to who is actually around the table. So the people that actually get a vote are the event group leads. So we have a jumps representative, a throws representative, a distance representative, somebody that covers the hurdles and combined events, and then the sprints representative. And then there's myself as well. So we're the only 6 people that get a vote if the vote is needed. Now, if a vote is needed and it's a tie, then my vote is classed as 2 votes. So that's why I look the way I am, because people keep sending me cakes and biscuits to help get their athletes over the line. So just think about that if you've got any athletes coming up next year. Get my address and send me a nice big cake. Also in the room, though, joking aside, is the non-voting members. So the chairperson is usually the team manager, so normally Lorna Dwyer. We have a statistician, can't say that word, it's easy to say, Ian Hodge. He is, as everyone, if you don't know who Ian Hodge is, he is the Oracle. He is actually faster and more accurate than Power of 10. And you know, he's a great person to have in the room because if something happened the night before, he'll know the stats on it. There'll be a note taker in there who will be obviously just taking minutes, making sure the process has been followed and there's no errors in the way we've selected the team. We have an independent observer who is usually from the athletics family. It's not somebody who's employed by one of the home nations, but it's someone who understands athletics and understands, you know, the kind of process we're going through. We also have an athletics commission representative, so an athlete commission representative that sits there, again, just making sure the due process is stuck to. And then the media officer is in there as well, compiling whatever report they need to release ahead of the team release date. So looking at the eligibility, first up, the athletes that we select have to be a full British passport holder. So we kind of know if anyone's on the radar that's going to look like they could be selected. We're trying to work in the background to get them that passport. There has been a few people in the past, and then there's been some people that have chose to compete for other nations as well. But ideally, you know, we will make sure if someone's doing really well, we'll try and make sure they do choose Britain and get that British passport sorted because we can't pick them without that. They have to be born, bearing in mind this was for 2019, they had to be born in 2000, 2001 and 2002. Now in a European junior year, the Europeans allow under 18s to compete, but we choose to only take the top tier of that age group, so the second year under 18s, if that makes sense. This is to avoid like 15, 16-year-old kids being up against 19-year-old behemoths that, you know, that's going to damage them maybe mentally or physically in the competition. You know, we don't want kids to accelerate the development too quickly. We want to make sure they stay on a nice progressive curve of progress. So that's why we restrict it to those 3 years. Obviously, every second year we have a World Junior Championships, and in that year there is an under 18s championship. So you know, it is quite tough on some of the age groups because they will not get to compete in a certain year, but that's just, it's how we prefer to do it at the moment. Now you also have to compete at the trials in the event you wish to be selected for. So athletes are the only people that are allowed not to have to do this are athletes who are contracted to an NCAA member university over in the States. So they will obviously still be in America. They'll not be able to come to, a lot of them can't come to our championships because they're still completing studies and competing for their athletics team over there. Also, the 3,000 and 5,000 meters have a specific event within a BMC competition, and the combined eventers obviously have their own combined events weekend as well, which is usually around about 3 weeks before the main national championships. There's also, if somebody's wanting to double up, they don't need to do both events at the championships. They can just choose one of them, and as long as they've conveyed their desire to double up to us or to their event group lead, then, you know, we can consider that. We'll also have a lot of conversations with them, with the athlete and the coach and the parents to say, you know, is this the right thing to be doing? Do you really want to double up? You know, is there a risk of injury? Are you mature enough to do this physically and mentally? Does the timetable allow it? You know, all things like that will be considered. Athletes are also required to fill in the team members agreement. Now, this is something that's done at senior level as well, and it's a great way of directing a desired behaviour from the athletes to help extract the best performance from them, and it keeps the behaviours much better while you're away. And finally, a European athletics regulation is that they have to complete the iRun Clean. Now, this is something you can do at any point in your career. So if you have a junior athlete right now that's looking to compete in the Europeans at some point, it's worth filling it in. It's 10, 15 minutes out of your life. It's a simple web format where you just answer a few questions, and you know, that helps to ensure that you are morally and ethically on the right page in terms of running clean, as we see on the bibs all the time. Now, one of the first things I look at when the timetable comes out is obviously the timetable. You can see here it's compacted into a very tight 4-day program with a lot of overlaps and issues that arise because of that. And I'll come to one of those issues later in the presentation regarding the relays. But for me as well, it's important to have conversations with the coaches and the athletes to make sure they're planning in the right way. For example, if you're a hammer thrower, a male hammer thrower, you can see that you're the first event on 9:45 a.m. on Thursday morning. Now, if all your training is done at 7 o'clock at night on a club night, you know, how are you going to be ready to perform at 9:45 a.m.? What does performing at 9:45 a.m. mean? You're looking at 35-minute call room time, so you need to be ready by about 9:10. That means your warm-up's going to be starting anywhere between 8 and 8:30. That means you'll be getting a buzz to the stadium. For those foreign people, a buzz is those double-decker things with lots of wheels and lots of seats on. I'm from Wigan, so everyone always criticises how I say that. But you know, you'll be getting a bus to the stadium at 7 a.m. That means you're going to have to be having your breakfast about 6:30. So with all that scenario in place, you know, will you have practiced that? Will you be ready to perform, basically? It's important that you do practice it, I feel, in training once you've seen the timetable. Now, selection standards are obviously very important. We cannot select you unless you have achieved these standards. These are the standards that we had in 2019, and you can see there's some quite difficult chances there. When we go away with other European countries, the kids are always saying, "Oh, can I have a look at your standards?" And they're always laughing at what we have to get. But we do prefer to set a higher standard than the rest of Europe. For instance, this 2019 year, if we'd have used the European Championship standard, we'd have had 15 boys with the qualifying standard for the 100 meters. Now, that could create some juicy competition at the national championships, but you know, we prefer to set the standards a little higher. If you actually achieve our standards, you'll more than likely make the final in your event. And you know, while some people look at this negatively and think, well, kids are going to push themselves too much and too soon in order to attain the standards, you know, we prefer to have the conversations with coaches and athletes and make sure that they're not rushing the development and that they take a long and steady approach. If the standards are out of your way, then, you know, don't push too hard to get there. If they are in your grasp and achievable, then you're going to have a good time at the championships if you've already got these standards. So round one, basically this is the winner of each trials event. They'll automatically be selected for the same event at the championships. And we also look at, as I mentioned earlier, those people from round two that look like they'll have a good chance of getting a medal out there. So looking at round one picks last summer, we came away with, there was 24 athletes that won the championships in the actual standard, and then there was 5 extra athletes that were very highly ranked in Europe and looked like they were going to get a medal, and three of them actually did get a medal at the championships. So they went onto the team as well. So we had 29 athletes, and the rest of them unfortunately were left sweating and trying to find races or competitions in order to get their standards. Now, round 2, there's quite a number of different criteria which helps us select the team. Obviously, we don't just go for the fastest 3 people, because that's not the fairest way of doing it. So in round 2, we look at anyone that's achieved at least 1 qualification standard within the qualification period. We also look at people that have demonstrated current form and fitness. So if you was to do some amazing time on the indoor circuit, but then not really been cutting it in the summer season, it's quite unlikely you'll get picked just because you have the standard. You know, you have to tick more boxes than that, unfortunately. So we look at things like current form, we look at the position at the trials, we look at future individual medal potential. But for me, that's a real difficult one, because, you know, we're not telepathic and we can't see into the future. So it is a very difficult one to grade people on. We look at what's happened at the past junior championships. We look at head-to-heads. We look at the potential for this summer's championships, and then there's other factors, particularly for sprinters who want to double up and things like that and contribute to relay teams. But those are all the factors that we have to consider before we actually pick the remaining people. So this next slide is one that I like to take with me to the meeting. Now, the event group leads we talked about earlier, they've been closely following all the events throughout the year, and they'll make a case for each athlete based on, you know, what conversations they've had with the coaches and the parents and the athletes, and, you know, they have a good understanding of the current form and everything like that. So they'll basically pitch up and say, these are the athletes I want to select. But I like to take this along with me because it helps me check and challenge the event group selectors. And throughout the year, I'm kind of updating this sheet. So as you can see, it started off earlier in the summer with about 10 or 12 people that had the standard, and then it just grew and grew and grew and didn't stop growing. So we ended up with 59 individuals that had the selection qualification standard. So I like to know a bit more detail about that. So obviously, as you can see, by the time we picked in round 2, unfortunately, Max Bergin, who'd run a world lead time, he pulled out injured. We also had a few other athletes that were injured on there. But I like to keep an eye on their actual European ranking as well. So you could see there we had 16 athletes that were ranked top 3 in Europe, and that's without Max Bergin, who'd been hurt himself. So it's valuable to have this information at hand. We also have obviously the oracle that is Ian Hodge as well, which is we're a great team in terms of making sure the right people are picked for the right places. But this is the reason I was begging and begging and begging and mithering all year long for extra places, because there were so many people that had achieved the standards. Now, when we have more than one person looking for one position, as I mentioned earlier, we have to look at all those set criteria. So an example is in the men's 800, we've mentioned earlier that Max Bergin pulled out. So Ben Patterson was the only automatic pick. So there was 2 other spaces available, but there was 3 guys that were very capable of filling those spaces. So we had to look at them individually and see who should go and who shouldn't. So on current form, both Oliver Dustin and Finlay Maclear ran PBs in the last races prior to the selection. And Alex Bottrell had his second best time of the year actually at the championships. The positions at the trials, Oliver Dustin was 8th, Finlay Maclear was 3rd, and Alex Botchell was 4th. So again, they're getting points over on the right-hand side there in a head-to-head situation. Future individual medal potential, like I say, it's very difficult to predict that. So I just give everybody a point on that criteria. The top 8 at the European juniors. So Oliver Dustin was ranked 3rd in Europe, Finlay Maclear was ranked 4th in Europe, and Alex Botchell was ranked 7th. So yes, they all get a point again because the potential to get top 8 is very strong. We then look at head-to-heads. So at the trials, obviously, Finlay was 3rd, Alex 4th, and Oliver 8th. Finlay, that was the only race he raced, any of the other guys, because he'd been away in Miami at university. So that kind of worked in his favour because he'd not lost any races to them. But it could have also worked against him in terms of he'd not had a chance to beat the others. But Oliver Dustin and Botchell, they both raced at Sport City, whereas Dustin won and Alex was 2nd. And they also raced a BMC in Watford. And again, Oliver was 1st and Alex came 3rd. So in head-to-heads between those two, Oliver was just given the nudge over Alex. And then obviously previous age group history, Oliver Dustin was a previous English Schools winner. Finlay Maclear didn't have any history. He was kind of a new kid on the block. And then Alex Botchell, the year earlier, had been a World Junior finalist. So it was agonising for Alex to not be able to pick him because he had such good experience the season before. But we had to be fair to everyone, and we had to stick to our criteria that we'd listed at the beginning of the season. And unfortunately, it was Alex that missed out. There's another example, again, where we had to use the head-to-heads in the men's 3,000 metres. So nobody had the automatic selection. The winner of the trials, for some reason, didn't have the time. Oh, no, sorry, the winner of the trials chose to do the 1,500 metres. So there's 4 boys, again, looking to fill the spots. So we use the same process, current form. One had a PB on the 29th of May, another on the 19th of May, another on the 29th of May, and the last one was a PB on the 3rd of July, so he was the most current. Then position at the trials, again, Max was 2nd, Joe Wigfield was 4th, Ben West and Henry, unfortunately, were 11th and 20th, so they didn't score highly in that round. Future medal potential, once again, everyone gets a 1 because we don't know. And then top 8 at European Juniors. So again, we look at those rankings, and all of them were ranked inside the top 11 in Europe. And then head-to-heads. So again, Max Hayden scored well because of his 2nd at the trials. He was also 2nd in a Brighton BMC, where Henry McCluskey in the same race was 3rd. And then Ben West was 4th at the Loughborough International, with Henry McCluskey coming 14th. So unfortunately for Henry, those 2 factors worked against him, and the fact that his PB was on the 29th of May and his position at the trials was 20th. So he was unfortunately the boy to miss out, although he had a very strong case of going himself. It was just an unprecedented year that we had so many good performers. But hopefully that kind of shows how we're as fair as we possibly can be. We're not just throwing darts into a dartboard with people's faces on in order to select them. We're using all the data and all the knowledge available to make sure it's a fair and honest decision. So after round 2 of selection, we had 57 athletes. So again, it's a good job I've been begging and borrowing, because we've not even come to relays yet, and that can take up a lot of spaces. So 57 athletes on the team, and 58 places filled because you've got Holly Mills doubling up. So as I say, round 3 is relays. So again, we have a British Athletics Futures relay program. So in terms of the sprint relay, we kind of have a very strong idea of who we want to take already. because we've seen what they've been like, what their engagement's been like on the program, and you know what the skills are like, because it is very important that baton skills, it's not just about the leg speed, it's got to be about baton skills as well, because it's at the time the baton gets round, not the human. So we look at the full commitment and engagement on that relay program. We look at current form, we look at head-to-heads, we look at major competition history, and we look at injury status. So those are all the factors that go into selecting the 4x1 and 4x4. Like I said before, we already have 59 people on the team, and the 4x1 was quite straightforward. We only needed 2 extras to make sure we had 6, and we were comfortable with a squad depth of 6 people. The 4x4s, we had a major problem because of the heats. The heats took out our 3 best runners. So Ethan Brown was predicted to still be involved, obviously, with the individual, being ranked 2nd in Europe. Ben Pattison is ranked 9th in Europe over 400, as well as, with Max being missing, he was ranked 2nd in Europe, behind Oliver Dustin. So, you know, he was going to be busy with the 800, so wouldn't be able to run in the heats of the 4x4. And Alistair Chalmers was going to be heavily involved in the 400 meter hurdles as well. So none of those 3 guys could have been used in the heats. So we had a big dilemma. Do we take 4 other people in order to get them through to the final, or do we not take a team at all? But with those 3 boys, you could have put me on the last leg and we would have got a medal, and that's saying something. And it's the same with the women as well. We had Amber Anning that was involved in the 400 individual, and Louise Evans. We had Holly Mills that had done the heptathlon, and we had Izzy Boffey that was going to be involved in the 800 meters. So the 4 of them would have been a very, very strong quartet that could medal. Probably, well, they did get the gold in the end. Sorry, I spoiled the ending there. But you know, is it worth taking 4 people in order to get them to the final? Yes, it was. So thankfully, again, my begging skills came into the fore, and we were able to take 4 extra people just to get them through the line. Now, for me, it's valuable experience, even in relays. Jenny Meadows, who my wife, who's listening, I've been nice about her, but she was came through her junior career pretty much doing lots of relays, and her early senior competition experience was through relays as well, and that gave her the experience and understanding of how to handle the bigger stage once she became the 800 meter runner that we know. So it is quite a valuable experience. One of the young girls took the baton in the heats and ran the whole lap in lane 3 on 2nd leg, so she forgot to brake. And you know, it's little things like that that make a huge difference. Running for your club in the UK, you don't make mistakes like that, but until you're pressure tested at an elite level like this, you don't see things come to the fore. And same with the men's 4x1. They were number 1 ranked relay team going in. We unfortunately lost Joe Ferguson to injury. We lost Jeremiah Azu to injury, but we still had a very strong chance. And they finished the race in 2nd place, but unfortunately lost and got disqualified due to a faulty changeover. So again, fabulous experience for those guys, even though they weren't successful. For me, a big part of it is what you do at the champs and how you handle yourself and what you learn and take away from it. It's not just, did you win? Oh, you didn't win, you're a loser then. No, you're not a loser. It's like, well, where am I on my progression, my development? What can I take from this experience to make me even better and maybe come back and do this again? So the total team, once the relay people were added to, was 69 athletes. So this is the biggest team we'd ever taken to a junior championships. And I was really excited about this going into the championships. The fact that we were actually taking so many people. I've not had any new shoes for since, because I donated this, that, and the other, and you know, there's people walking around Birmingham barefoot because we begged, screamed, and borrowed to get them there, but it was worth it, because there's a lot of people got some valuable experience whilst out there. Now, there is a round 4, which is a team leader's discretionary selection. So this is where I can nominate a certain number of people, and the panel can decide if I'm just away with the furries, or if it's a valid point to take them. Now, unfortunately, we didn't even get to discuss this, because as you've seen, we took 69 people. We've already broken the bank, and there was no money left in the pot. But literally, I would turn up and I would like to discuss a few people. So young Emily Williams, she'd missed the actual standard by 0.07 in the 1500. You know, 700ths away from this time. You know, she's very, very close, and she was ranked 9th in Europe with the time. So there's, you know, she's probably going to make the final. Frankie Johnson, he got the standard 5:15, but it wasn't the grade 2 meeting, so they didn't have the relevant boxes ticked, unfortunately. Chris Snook, again, 10k walker, ranked 6th in Europe, and so on. But unfortunately, we just had to bypass this round. The year before, for the World Juniors, it was my pick to take a 4x4 men's team. Nobody in the men's 400 had actually achieved the standard, but I knew that we had 2 really good, strong 400 hurdlers out there, and with 2 extras thrown into the mix, we could potentially get a medal. And yeah, thankfully we took a 4x4 team, and they came away with the bronze medal, and the guys had a fabulous kind of experience from that. So it can be a valuable tool to have. Giving someone that chance that is quite close, but unfortunately we didn't get to do it last year. So that's kind of my kind of take on how the summer selection went. You know, as I've said before, the championships is a fabulous learning environment. No matter what you do there, if you bomb out in the heats, or if you come home with a gold medal, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean your career's over, and it doesn't mean you're going to be the next Arnold Duplantis. You know, you've got to still go away and do a lot of hard work and continue your development. But hopefully you'll have learned a lot of lessons from competing in that pressurized environment that will help you in the future. So
cool. Over to me then. I just wanted to start, like, massive thank you, Trevor. I think it was really interesting. It was really interesting to just, it's a great example of like just to demonstrate the thorough process that you do actually go through as part of these selections. I was making notes as I was going through that, even though I've seen this presentation before you put it on. So I hope the people that are tuning in have made as many notes as I have and got as many learning points. This is opportunity now to try and ask Trev some questions. So if you would like to, stick a question in the chat box, put a question mark at the end of it, and it's easier to flag on my list. But yeah, to give you some time to think of some questions, I want to try and dive in first, if that's all right, Trev. So there's 3 key groups of people I want to ask a question about. So it's kind of one bit of advice for athletes who are wanting to be selected or like be considered for it. So what would be your big one piece of advice to them? Same question, one bit of advice for the parents of those athletes, so the parents of the athletes that are potentially going to be selected or in line for selection. And then my third one bit of advice for the personal coaches of those athletes and what they can do to give themselves that greatest chance of achieving that selection and being put on the team. So athlete, parents, coaches, please.
Yeah, I think we can lump it all into one answer, basically, and it's down to the planning and organisation that you've done throughout the whole year. So the selection standards and the selection policy is usually out early December, late November. And And you know, so you've got all the information there. So then you can set your plan about, right, is that achievable? Okay, so how do we achieve it? What's the process we've got to follow to be as professional as possible, and to make sure all your lifestyle decisions are geared towards that selection? And you know, it's not so much living like a robot, because you know, you do need to be a teenager and have a life. Because I do feel if athletes aren't happy, they're not going to perform well. So you've got to get that balance right between being a high performance nun, as it would be, to having a bit of a laugh as well at the same time. And if you get the mix and the balance right, I do feel you'll have a good chance of hitting those standards.
Okay. What would you say to the parents? Anything?
Parents are often the best thing and the worst thing in an athlete's life. You know, everyone knows those kind of pushy parents that you've seen, but they are needed in a way, because the teenagers don't tend to have the same personal drive. You will have obviously some individuals that do, but the majority of them need that little bit of a nudge. So, you know, in terms of, again, it's getting the balance right for parents. When are they pushing too much, and when are they just giving the right amount of support to the athletes? Because ultimately there's one job to do, and that is get that qualification standard. You know, it's not training like Rocky, lifting logs in the snow and chasing chickens if you're miles away from that standard. It's being sensible and thinking, well, you know what, don't worry, let's aim for the under 23s at that age group, and we'll make sure our progress is a nice, steady and measurable curve, rather than, you know, going all out to reach this peak too soon and then falling off the edge of that cliff and not doing anything again. So, you know, for parents, it's understanding what is rational and the right way to go around this. You know, are we pushing too hard by going for it, or should we, you know, help our athlete get the best out of their career?
Yeah, there's been some really great advocate parents that really advocate well for their children. I think that's been really, really good. And finally, then, best advice for personal coaches hoping to get athletes selected onto international teams?
There's for me, again, it is that planning that's going into it, and you know, the coach tends to know more about what the athlete can do. You know, the athletes are quite often underconfident and don't quite believe until they've done it, whereas the coach can see these measures that are happening in training. So, you know, don't get carried away, and don't kind of over believe in your athlete, but likewise you've got to push them and guide them to that performance that they're looking for. Again, it's all about balance. You know, you can blow all the smoke you like up the athlete's backside, for want of a better term. You know, but ultimately that's not going to help them. If you tell them they're good and they're amazing all the time, when they're actually not, then it's going to make them overbelieve in themselves. So you've got to be rational in your kind of conversations with them, and make sure that you're giving them something to aim for, and you're giving them something to work on, but you're also critical at the same time, and critical in the right way, not just bashing your athlete, oh, that was terrible, this was horrible, and you'll never make it. It's, you know, be positive as best as you can, but be rational in terms of, are we really going for this, you know, 19-meter shot put throw when you're a 14-meter PB? You know.
So, like, obviously, I've sat on the selection panels before, and I think one of the good things that personal coaches can do as well is, if they know who the selectors are, who the team leader is, that sort of thing, like building that relationship with them does really, really help. So there's been, you know, several personal coaches like just come to competitions, introduce themselves, especially at national championships when they're hoping to achieve the standards, introduce themselves to me, and then we can build that relationship, and I can have a better understanding of how how the athlete's progressing, what training's looking like, all of that type of stuff. And I think sometimes it's got a dual purpose of, yes, it'll give me more information, be able to provide better support during the selection. But if they are successful and go to championships, we've already built that rapport as well. So I think the coaches can have a huge impact, huge positive impact on that. The chances of being selected and also the chances of being successful in the championships if they build that relationship up with the selectors and the team coaches that are involved, and yourself as the team leader. So I think
100%. One of my big points is getting our staff to build those relationships, and I'm always asking them to work as hard as you can, speak to as many people as you can, and even if it's just how are you, how's it going, whatever, you don't know what's going to come from that. And I know the 2 years that I've been doing the role, leading up to the World Juniors, not many people knew me and didn't know that I was in that particular role. But then the second year, my life was absolutely crazy. My phone was never stopping. I was answering emails all the time. And whenever I went to any meeting, be it a BMC or even a local meeting in the Northwest, people were there. Oh, you're that guy to talk to. When's the selection policy out? What's the standard for this? Blah, blah, blah. And, it's great to have those conversations, because ultimately, the more people that know what's required, the better. And even if your athlete doesn't make it to that championships, you'll have hopefully had conversations which will have helped you develop as a coach and help the parents develop as parents, and hopefully help the athlete develop as an athlete.
Yeah, great advice. Okay, so we've got some questions coming from people that have attended. So a question from Dominic. So how, if all, does Mannheim fit into the selection process? So how does Mannheim fit in, especially for the juniors?
Yeah, so Mannheim is historically it's a sprints and kind of relay weekend. So we only take 20 athletes to Mannheim, 12 of which are relay runners. That's kind of, we use it as a practice for them. And then we obviously have 8 more places where we take throwers, jumpers, and we don't bother with the endurance, because the endurance have got a fabulous kind of platform, the BMC in Britain, and so that they don't really need to go along to Mannheim, even though there is endurance events there. So it is only a small meeting. Again, if we had a bottomless pit of money, then I would be begging could we take more people, because it is a fabulous weekend of high standard athletics, and it's a great place to learn your trade. Jake Norris a couple of years ago had a great throw out in Mannheim, and then backed that up with a World Junior goal. Molly Gowdry did the same. She brought the British record out there. So, it's a fabulous event to take part in, and it's a great stepping stone towards the championship.
Cool. Question in from Steph. Where can you find the international competitions coming up? What's been rescheduled, etc., due to COVID? So where will the information about those competitions be available? Is it through the UKA website, like you stated before at the start?
Yeah. So I mean, obviously, the majority of stuff we unfortunately lost only last week. The European cross country, which was going to be in Dublin next year. So that's bitten the dust now as well. But there might be a reprise in that. I'm not sure if it was Hungary or somebody has said instead. So potential for that to still go ahead is watch this space. Keep your eye on the UK website. As soon as any selection information is available, it will be out there. But normally around about November, we will post next summer's information so that you can start to plan ahead and get yourselves ready.
For English international teams, they're available through the Athletics website. So I think you go to competition, and then there's track and field teams are there, so you can click on that, and it normally has the selection policies underneath that. I'm going to click to question and answer mode, because I want to try and flag and publish this because it's quite a long question. So a question from Joe. So with athletes moving into the junior age group, we often have discussions about reducing the number of times they compete in a year and finding quality competition rather than over competing or chasing standards. How does the selection panel look at this? It's a great question from Joe.
It's a great question, Joe. Yeah. So obviously, I would look unfavourably at someone who's done 15 races in order to achieve the standard, because compared to somebody who's only done 3 races to get the standard, one of them is going to be a lot fresher and a lot more productive at the championships. Obviously, I know Joe personally is a multi-events coach, and the multi-eventers themselves, they don't get to compete in many multi-events, and it's often quite a shame because their national championships at the very beginning of summer, and often the weather's not amazing, so it's hard to achieve standards. So that for them to have to go off and try and get another standard, it could be quite detrimental to the shape they'll be in when they get to the champs. So we had that in 2018 with a multi-eventer who kind of got the standard, but just missed the standard, and he was looking to go and get another attempt at it. But I had a conversation with him, like, look, it's not worth your while doing that, because you'll be absolutely shattered come the championships. So it is, again, finding that balance, and the coaches, you'll tend to know your athletes more than anyone else in terms of, can they cope with that extra race? Can they cope with that extra throws competition? Do they need it? Do they peak off, like, do they need 6 meets in order to peak, or can they peak off 3? So in terms of how we as a selection panel look at it, we're not too fussed how many you've done. Obviously, if you've done a hell of a lot, then it's gonna need a few conversations as to, will you still be in shape? It's not a huge component in terms of how much you've done.
Thank you. And we've got another question in from Joe, who does apologise that he only asks long questions. So, and looking into your crystal ball, is it Mystic Meg? With being a Euro Under-20, World Under-20, and Euro Under-18 now scheduled for 2021, do you anticipate any significant changes to how teams might be selected next year?
It does need a crystal ball to answer that one. We do have some meetings planned in the next couple of weeks to discuss this exact issue. Obviously, budget's going to be massively impacting on this. With the World Juniors this summer, we had planned to go to South Africa for a week for them to acclimatise to the heat and the height of the altitude before they go to the championships. And now it's going to be very tight. Some staff will have been out at the Olympics. Some athletes might have even been out at the Olympics. So to come back from there, are they going to be in the right frame of mind to be able to go away and do a competition like the World Juniors again? Again, weather conditions in August are totally different in South Africa to what they're like in July. So we'll have to look at whether it's the best option for us to do that. But in terms of team sizes, I do feel Euro Under-20 is more of a developmental kind of meeting, and with the World Junior, not so much a developmental, it's more of an elite kind of specific competition. So it may well be that obviously the standards are a little higher for the Worlds, and we just take a smaller compact team there. We've taken a big team to the Euro Under-20s in order to give everyone that kind of exposure, especially to the younger ones, because they're going to have a World Juniors the year after as well in Colombia. So it'd be good to have a look at as many of the younger Under-20s as we can.
It's going to be a fun meeting, that, trying to work out what the best way to do is. Definitely. Question in from Katie. Is there anything you would say an athlete should not do when trying to get selected that might change the selector's mind and not pick them? So I don't know whether this is in relation to the competitions that they might do, the behaviour they might show. I'm not really sure. Wide open for you to answer that, Trev. So
Yeah, obviously which cake you buy me is very important. Because if you buy me one of those cream sponge ones, it's not going to go down well. But no, seriously, it is. There are people that have kind of unselected themselves in the past with, racing one too many times and getting themselves hurt and then having to miss. It is about. For some people, it's a bit of a gamble, isn't it? Because you're on that edge. You've run the time, but so have others. And are you going to be in the mix? And it's heartbreaking. I've been in that situation as a coach with Jen, through her career. And you're like, what do we do another race, or do we hold our nerve and just wait for it it's not an easy question to answer that. But as long as the one major thing I would say is don't overcompete. Don't kill yourself trying to achieve it. A fresher, happier athlete will perform better and have a better chance of getting the selection standards. So you do see at a very young age athletes race every week, and there's no building process in between the races and competitions. So if you can be selective, you plot yourself a journey towards a competition, then hopefully you won't be having to worry about changing selectors' minds, things like that. Hope that helps. It's a difficult one to answer that.
It is, yeah. Essentially, don't get injured. Is that what you're saying? That's the biggest distractor, because you won't be able to show current form if you get injured. So.
Yeah.
Question from Cheryl. So, when an athlete is chosen, how do you communicate with their coach, and do you advise any changes to their current training program, or do you leave it to the coach to carry on with the athlete in training?
Yeah, well, we can kind of advise, but ultimately it's the coaches. The coach knows the athlete better than us. So if they've asked for advice, we'll definitely be there to help them. But we try not to kind of impact too much unless we see something really dangerous happening, and too many races or too much training, too much volume, and things like that. But hopefully those kind of problems have been eradicated throughout the summer, because the event group leads are having constant discussions, and they've got very familiar with the coaches already. So they'll already have said, you guys running 80 miles a week, does he really need that? Freshen him up, and things like that. But if it turns out that he thrives better off that, then so be it. Ultimately the coaches know the athletes better than us. But yeah, once we've selected the team, the event group leads go away and they spend the whole afternoon ringing up the athletes, and that's one of the best things about being an event group lead, I feel, because the joy you bring to those athletes is just something else. It makes you feel real good to call them up and say, you know what, you're on the plane, well done, and or you might say it better than that. But
the tears of joy you get and the pride that you can hear down the phone is just, it makes me get a little bit emotional when you hear it sometimes.
I'm the same, yeah. And there's usually a parent in the background screaming and things like that. But yeah, then we'll have the conversation with coaches as well. And I usually get a very busy night because coaches are ringing me saying, "Can I have a coaching pass?" Blah blah blah. So I'm trying to kind of facilitate that side of things as well. But ultimately, it's a great moment for a coach. It's a great moment for an athlete, and it's wonderful for the parents as well to see your kid to be super happy and to have achieved something that they've worked really hard to get. So that phone conversation is probably for me one of the best parts of the job.
Yeah, and I think normally the successful athletes, their personal coaches will know who those selectors are already. So they'll probably have had a relationship with them. So they'll probably just, like I've done before, mention it. If your coach wants to speak to us after this call, just get them to give us a ring and I can sort of outline stuff. I think some of the specific stuff that they might do, like I know Cheryl's a throws coach, so I might talk through what's available. If there's a holding camp or what's available at the training facility in the week building up to the day that they might be doing their qualifying or whatever, and what their access is going to be like. Will the coach want to attend and get a pass? Will they just want to attend and stay in the crowd? If so, if I'm needing to guide them through that training session, warm up, whatever, something like, so Divine used to like doing our shakeouts and things. If she's needing me to do that, like as part of being that team coach, then we'd need to have a discussion about that and what that looks like. So if there's anything specific, and also, you know, there's been occasions where the coach has said they're going to get really excited when they go on camping away with the team, and they'll want to train loads and loads, and it's been my responsibility to sort of pull them back so they're doing just enough to keep them ready. So yeah, I think the team coaches that will support them whilst they're away are really open to try and work with you to make it the best possible. But yeah, probably just kind of make you understand what the opportunities are to train and things in the build up to the competition, and also when you're out there. But yeah, I would just pick up the phone straight away if an athlete you've coached gets selected, so that you can work out the nitty gritty and the detail of it building up. But it will very much be a personal coach led process into the champs, I would say. Another question in from Mr. Frost. So last questions, he promises.
You should have just run me, Joe.
Specifically for combined events with the national champs or trial being in May, is there an expectation that they will compete in some way at the individual event trials in June to at least show form and fitness? Really good, but highly specific question from Joe there. I love that. Right, Trev, off you go.
3 crackers he's come up with tonight, and he's had his Weetabix today, hasn't he? But no, mate, no, not at all. You'll be having conversations with the event group lead all through the year, and with myself as well. And if you say that athlete A won't be at the trials, or athlete B is going to come to the trials and focus on her shot or her hurdling or whatever it might be, then that's fine. As long as we're in the loop and that we've got those conversations going. If they've got the standard, there's a good chance they'll get picked. Obviously, you're playing a gambling role in terms of you might be ranked second in the rankings as a heptathlete, and then someone might go and beat your score in another event. So there's so many factors to take into account, but there's no specific requirement for your athlete to turn up to the trials. They're welcome to do so in an individual event or as many events as they want if it's good for their practice. But ultimately, if you was to win the multi-events championships with the standard, then you need to do whatever's right for you building up to the championships in Tallinn next year. So you if you're telling me you don't want to compete, fine, I'm happy with that, because you know your athlete more than me. And if you're telling me you want to do 3 events at the trials because she really needs to work on this and this, then once again, it's fine.
Good. Okay, question from Dominic again. So how do you position under 23 Euros in relation to an athlete's senior career? Great question, I think, again, in terms of got some corkers tonight.
These guys are on fire, aren't they? Yeah, the under 23s is a really valuable tool for some athletes. So there's lots of athletes that have had a great senior career that have never been to under 20 championships, but they went to under 23s. They were a late developer, and that under 23s was a fabulous tool for them to kind of get that experience and exposure to senior level competition. So there are people that don't kind of buy in too much to under 23s, because a lot of the kids that are under 23 are already elite. So your Gemma Rikis and people like that, they're already cutting it as a senior. So not all of them choose to go to under 23 champs. Gemma did last year, and she got gold in the 8 and the 15. She doubled up and won both. But some people of her standard don't bother to go. But that doesn't mean to say it is not a viable tool, because there's lots of athletes, like I say, that have never done a junior career. So that's where you're going to get your schooling done, by going there and competing at that level and seeing what it's like to have to cope with a 35-minute call room, sitting on a chair looking at the Germans and it used to be Russians, the Polish and so on, and they've all got different ways, and You know, some are staring at you like they're going to eat you, and some are just like doing their own thing with a towel over their head. And it's like, how are you going to cope with all that? Because it's totally new. You don't get it at a Northern League or a Southern League event. It is totally different. So it is very valuable, I feel, particularly for those late developers, but also for those that, you know, it bridges the gap between senior competition and junior. So you get lots of juniors doing well as an under 20, and then they kind of, if they didn't have an under 23 chance, it could be 3, 4, 5 years before they make it to a senior team. You know, depending on when the Commonwealth Games fits into that timescale. So, you know, for them to get exposure to that sort of competition, Euro under 23s is fabulous in my eye.
I think, I mean, I might be slightly biased, but I think it's even more important for throws, with it being potentially the first opportunity for the male hammer throwers to throw that 7, and male shot putters to be throwing the 7 as well. I think there's, it is an easier stepping stone to go from under 23s to then senior. So, and potentially that later developers, really good opportunity. But it's the amount of learning that goes on at under 23s is unbelievable when you assume that they're all adults and all that sort of stuff. But there's still so much to learn at that stage, and it's a really high level, especially within throws, because of being European. So sometimes I think that the speed events don't think it has high level competition potentially, because they're not competing against Jamaicans, USA, things like that. But in throws, it's massively important, I think. So, right, that's all the questions we've got in at the moment. So unless anyone's got any extras, just conscious of people's time, we've just gone over the hour there. So just a massive thank you to you, Trev, for taking the time, putting this together, and sort of, raising the roof on what the selection process is. I think it's vitally important we all understand it, to kind of benefit the athletes, give them potential, the best possible opportunity to be selected, to get these opportunities to go learn, compete for the country, and enjoy themselves, essentially, because that's what we all want, isn't it? So thank you so much for it.
That's why we're in the sport, isn't it? For enjoyment, but also for development. And any more questions you get, my email address is on the selection policy itself. So, pick up the phone, send me an email, whatever you need to do if you've got any questions, and if you've any doubts about anything, what's the best way to do this or whatever.